Welcome back to the After Hours show for the Speaker Agenda. This is my guest, Markellos Diorinos from Bryq. So we just finished up the main Speaker Agenda show, but I got some hard-hitting questions for you. The first one is, great, I've implemented an assessment program. I love it. But how do I know that it's actually successful?
Well, I'll tell you what most of our customers do, right? They come in and they look at what we're saying and they're saying, yeah, it sounds promising, but how do I trust you? And then the first thing that they're going to do is go ahead and assess themselves. You have a quantity that you know and hopefully understand very well yourself. Once you go through the assessment, you're going to see what's the depiction, what's the recording of your personality and of your skills that the assessment is going to take. All of our customers, bar none, have said that, yes, this is what I am. It's not 100% who I think I am because, hey, there's accuracy, and B, people don't always like to admit all the things that they are. So sometimes, an assessment always opens up some of your horizons in areas where you think that I'm probably not as warm to people as I'd like. This is what usually
not only
comes
that,
up.
but your assessment is not, a 2-hour personality assessment, cognitive skills assessment, psychometric assessment. It's just 20 minutes, right? So you can't get the full picture. You're probably just taking a majority of the snippets, right?
Best 20 minutes you've ever spent. That's how we
so
like to think
these are more
it.
talking points, a summary of. It's not a full-blown deep depth or deep dive analysis of what's wrong with you.
You'd be amazed about the level of detail that you can get in those 20 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can always do better, but man, you should try it out yourself. We'll send you an assessment, take it, and see the kind of results as you get. Once you do this,
I will take it because I love taking these. I love seeing what's broken with myself, so I can work on it.
I remember that the assessment is more of a recording of who you are, right? There's no pass and fail. There's no you're good or bad. This is who you are. Now, this works.
It's pass and fail as far as, is a candidate going to get a job offer or not, right? Unfortunately, you don't know what the passing grade is with an organization. You don't know whether they're looking for somebody that is hard driving, cold as steel, and they just want the job done, or do they want warm and fluffy? You don't know because you don't know what their assessments are. So my next question is, right now we're in the corporate world, especially enterprise, we're all about assessing candidates. What about assessing hiring managers and organizations as a whole, and then providing that information, being as transparent as possible back to the candidates?
The same principles that we apply to the candidates can be applied throughout an organization, right? So we're already having customers who are saying, hey, I'm assessing teams. I'm going to understand the team dynamics. I'm assessing different teams, and I'm trying to understand why these teams are not working well together. And sometimes it's pretty easy, right? You can see that a team is super assertive, a team is super cooperative. You know what the problem is when these two guys
I know what the problem is.
Right?
John's an a-hole. That's what the problem is. We need to get him off the team.
Well, it's nice if you can narrow it down to a person, but sometimes all those teams need balancing, right? So you can look at your team's profile and say, hey, we have none of that skill, right? We have no one who's socially bold. There's no one here who can hold a presentation because we're all of the same type. So when we do need to go to a show, who do we take? Let's make sure that we reinforce our team with someone who brings in these additional skills. You can always do this scenario. Much like we invested a lot into making sure that we don't have pass and fail, we don't have black and white, but if I'm looking at Jeff and I'm saying, man, Jeff, he's really not going to make a good journalist. His profile doesn't match it. Could he do something else for me? And then I can run scenarios, right? And I can say, how would score Jeff as a software developer? How would he score as a CEO? And it's going to give me different answers. And this is going to help me sometimes reuse talent that comes in. I can finally figure out how to use them. And we're already discussing with some customers about using this in an M&A environment, right? This is where you have a massive waste of talent because you have all these people coming in. After a merger, you have 1,000 people here and 1,000 people on both sides, and you have to let 500 go. How do you decide which 500? There hasn't been a good way, right? This has been done mostly in the seat of the pants.
The way right now is the acquiring company gets to decide, right? So it's usually done by, what's duplicated in the organization and what's not. The acquiring company is going to keep their accounting system. They're going to keep most likely their HR and talent acquisition. Most of the other stuff, unless they're buying some kind of technology, it's gone.
But you know what's also going to happen, right? A few months later, they're going to start hiring more people, probably with comparable skill sets. So if I'm firing him today, maybe I could be using him in something else. And this is all about talent, right? People are the most precious resource that a company has. So
how do
why
you
throw
deal with
them
that?
away
Because
like that?
that's not based on an open requisition. That's based on evaluating the skill sets across the entire organization, pushing it out to 1,000 or 2,000 people. I assume you have some kind of different model for that.
It's a completely different model where you do the same assessment because essentially you need the same inventory, but then you start building different models and you're saying, hey, here's a person that I don't know what to do with. Give me a few ideas. Where would he be a good fit? And you have all these open profiles, and the system can tell you, look, he would be a good match here, here, and here. And then you start discussing with the candidate what might be a possible career path for them, right? Essentially respecting the candidate and trying to give him a career path that makes sense for him or her.
Right. So, all right, going to put your feet to the fire a little bit. A couple years ago, I was at HR Technology, and from all accounts, this year was no different, 2019. But when I was walking around the HR tech floor, every single booth, it seemed like, had some kind of AI, machine learning, natural language processing, NLP, cognitive, whatever. And they're using it to really position themselves in the marketplace as, hey, we are leading edge, bleeding edge, or whatever. Why aren't you guys using AI in your process, or are you using AI in your process? I looked
We are
all over
not.
your website. I didn't see anything on AI. So
We consistently and consciously avoid using AI, even though we would love to. It's a technology that's very sexy, and our dev guys are always coming up and said, "Hey, I have this machine learning model for this and that. Why don't we use it?" The problem with what we did is that we wanted it to be unbiased, right? We wanted to make sure that it works and it doesn't perpetuate any of the problems that we have in the hiring system. So when you create an AI, and by AI people usually mean machine learning models, what it does is that you give him a sample, you're saying him, here 100,000 people I've hired, do more like that. And when you're saying do more like that, you're essentially saying, look at the mistakes I've made in the past 10 years, give me more of those mistakes. I loved them. I want more like that. And this case of Amazon, right? Amazon is really good at big data. And they've actually created a system and said, hire more people like we did before. And it was hiring people like they did before, meaning that it was a sexist system. It had bias from a number of different things, right? How do you remove this bias? To date, and I'm saying to date because as we speak, someone may be finding out how to do it, there exists no good solution to do this and by removing bias. Once we go to a data set, for example, candidates that have been hired by Bryq that we know are unbiased, then it's much easier to say, now that I have an unbiased data sample, let me take this into a machine learning model and let me make this faster, make this more refined, make this more granular, do all these things. But until we get to that point, there's no way that we can do this and in good conscience say we have a bias-free system.
So is there amount of data or number of assessments that you're targeting? Is it 1 million, 10 million? Because you need massive amount. I mean,
I
when I
think
was at
we're looking.
IBM, we had Watson Recruit, and it was a AI cognitive system. Then we built in a lot of the assessments and stuff like that because they had acquired a Connexa, which I came in through that acquisition. So we had 300 or 400 IO psychologists writing these talent assessments, right? So we got pretty good at this, but putting it into the AI search engine, we found out that, hey, there is a lot of bias here. So we eventually had to back it out. And that was one of the major selling points of it, right? But we had trained this entire engine on only about 1 million resumes. And if you take a million people out of how many people in the world? 7 billion. And let's say that 3 billion, 3.5 billion are actually of working age. And let's say that half of that, 1.5 to 2 billion, have resumes that are actually viable that you could put into some kind of a system where they're applying for jobs. Okay, so let's say you got 1 billion. we trained it on 1 million resumes. That's a far shot away from 1 billion, right? So where is your threshold? How many resumes or how many assessments do you need to get it trained to where it's actually functional?
It's a good question, and we'll have to see. What we're always doing, and what I've done in previous jobs with machine learning model, is that you run them in parallel to your existing model, and you see which one performs better. You can start training machine learning with samples as small as a couple of thousand. I would probably be looking not for a couple of thousand assessments, a couple of thousand hires, which would mean 10 or 100 times as many assessments.
Right.
But even
If
so,
a
remember we're
company is
talking.
hiring, let's say a company's hiring 1,000 people a year, right? Which is a fairly significant. Most companies are not hiring 1,000 people a year. And let's say they assume you put every person through that assessment, right? Not everybody is going to be for the same position. You're going to have 10% of them are going to be salespeople, 20% are going to be accounting people, whatever. So now you don't have 1,000 salespeople assessments. You've got 100. It's going to take you 10 years to get to where you need to be.
If in 10 years we have a system that's actually doing this with AI reliably, man, I'd be super happy, right?
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
This is long-term planning. This is not something that we
right,
can fix in 6 months or a year, right?
right.
It's going to take a lot of time, and we think that between getting enough data and having some advancements in things like forensic AI, where we start thinking about explaining the results of the AI. Remember, systems like Bryq, they tell you why someone is a good match, right? You can sit down to the very latest thing that, I don't know, Jeff is a perfectionist and I don't need a perfectionist for this job.
Right.
We explain this to you. When you have an AI system, it's more like Jeff is a 50.
Yeah.
So what can I do with a 50? How do I interview a 50?
That's my next question is, great, I've taken all these candidates through the assessment journey, and they've had a fantastic time taking your assessment, and they get the results back. The hiring manager gets the results, the recruiter gets the results, but nobody knows how to interpret them, right? Everybody's using different benchmarks or different their own personality, and well, I want somebody that does this and I want somebody that does that, or this guy's not going to be a good fit and this gal's not going to be a good fit because of this, that, and the other, and nobody has agreement. How are you educating your clients to make sure that they are using those assessments properly or interpreting them properly?
It's not easy. Let me start off with that.
I know it's not easy. I've done it.
By providing explainable results and results that people can relate to by seeing themselves, it's the first thing is that they don't have a hard time processing the information, right?
Yeah.
Bryq's final report is 2 pages, of which half of it is, the candidate's name and pictures and nice stuff. We're doing this so that you can have in one look, you can see what matters and what not, what's red and what's green. So you can focus on the items that really matter. Having said that, hiring managers are hiring managers, right? You cannot do perfect hiring if the manager of the team is imperfect. Meaning that if the manager is trying to create a monoculture and he only wants guys who are just like him, I cannot fix that with a tool, right? This is just a puzzle. It's a piece of the solution. I wish we could fix everything with just one tool.
Can't. People are complex, that's for sure. And I mean, what kind of roles do you think the assessments are really good at? Is this good for high volume, like call center and tech support reps, or even people working cashiers? Or is this really for like higher level software engineers, hardware engineers, chip designers, accountants? What kind of roles are assessments really good for?
We've seen our customers using it with everything, right?
Okay.
Where with all white label jobs, it has worked fantastically. Whether you're talking about a customer service representative, whether you're talking about, we had one of our customers who's a travel agency, and he was looking for travel salespeople. Very specific skill set. They needed to have a couple of different things. Worked fantastically for him in finding just the right people, right? Software developers, you're still going to assess them for their particular programming skills, right? If you need them to know Java, you have to give them a Java assessment, Python, or whatever it is. But in terms of personality and overall cognitive power, using an assessment is fantastic in helping you get there. Having said that, where we're now trying to expand more is more in blue collar jobs, because personality is also very important there. If you're a waiter, if you're a cook, all these things. But these people are not as fond of assessments as the rest.
I would say the level of fondness greatly dips. So, do you think that a company could position this as one of their competitive advantages for hiring?
The most important thing, the most important asset in a company is people, right? If you have a tool, any tool that can help you get better quality of people, you're essentially raising the value of your company.
Mm-hmm.
This should be an instrumental tool. And if they're not using us, they should use something, right? Anything is better than just going and throwing talent and hiring in a seat of the pants fashion. You have to have a method. You have so many companies that have distributed hiring, and they get a widely varying quality of talent because each region, each office is doing their own thing, right? Standardize, use something that makes sense, align it to the company values. These are all things that are very hard to do without a system.
So, are there differences when you translate it from English into Greek and Italian and French and German? Do you see different assessments because of that? Or I assume you have to ask the same questions to all the different candidates, no matter what language you're speaking, right? But
We're
does
still only available in English, and we're now working on our Spanish and Portuguese versions, just because
okay,
these are the next biggest market. Unfortunately, it's more complex than an assessment, right? Because when you use something, than a translation, sorry. When you translate an assessment, you have to make sure that what comes out is equally valid, equally reliable as the original.
right,
So we always try to either use adaptations of existing in-language proven assessments, or we have to run our own validation studies just to make sure that what we're doing is as equally reliable as the English version is. So it's not
okay,
just let's not do 20 languages, let's do Japanese.
right. You can't just throw it through Google Translate and expect that it's going to contextually work out the same, right?
I'm the CEO, so it's not like I didn't try, but there were so many people that stopped me and they said, man, you can't just do it, but we have a customer in Japan. They just don't let me.
Yeah, that's how I would have done it too. um, so we got one last question. What are some of the biggest mistakes companies do when implementing some kind of assessment program?
There are two things one thing I see in my customers, which is they tend to overspecify. Once you have a tool where you can click things and say, okay, here's my wish list. I want him to be 185 tall, I don't know, 6 feet tall. Let's make it sure that the American audience gets it.
Yeah,
And I want him to be blonde and this and that. People will eventually tick those boxes, right? So we're now in the process of building a warning mechanism. When you're over specifying, it tells you, man, you should not over specify. You need to be really sure about what you're doing. Here's more info about this. Educate yourself. A lot about a good tool is preventing you from hurting yourself. And with any tool, it's easy to hurt yourself. So that's one part. And the other part is that people sometimes do the assessments, and we don't see it happening with Bryq, but we've seen it with a lot of the other assessments. They get back a report that is yay thick. No one ever reads it.
yeah. It's like
It's
having
just
a
ticking a
10-page
box,
resume.
right?
Nobody reads past page 2 or 3, right?
So we wanted to create something that people are going to actually use. Have a look, understand who the candidate is. No one has the time nowadays to read a 20-page report. It's
Yeah.
just not going to happen.
Especially not on hundreds or thousands of candidates. It's not going to happen. Certainly, who is reading the report? Is the recruiter reading the report? Is the hiring manager? Or is everybody on the interviewing,
We'd like
committee, if you
everyone to
will?
read the report, right?
Okay.
Because think about how inefficient interviews are. You go in, Jeff comes in to interview with me, and then I'm starting to read his CV, and I'm trying to guess what might be a problem with Jeff. What is he good at? What would he suck at? What would be a problem in this specific position? I cannot answer this, right? So because Jeff happens to be charismatic, he's gonna do fantastic. I like him. He's a very likable guy.
I know.
Does this
I'm a
necessarily
likable guy.
does this mean that you're gonna be good for the job though? It
Yes.
doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And a lot of people hire with likability, right?
Yeah.
The famous beer test. It's wrong. It's part of it, yes.
Well, what's the famous beer test? Is I could go out, I could see myself having a beer with this guy or gal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's you do it even unconsciously. Everybody goes through the beer test, but it's not helping. If instead, before you go into an interview, I can say a report about Jeff and say, hey, look at Jeff. Jeff is super good in numerical. His attention to detail is close to zero. Okay, he just doesn't have it.
That's pretty
Pattern
accurate.
matching doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna know, do I care about this? I probably don't care about this in this role. And then I look at your personality and say, man, he's a perfectionist. Look at the awesome show he's putting out. Every detail is taken care of. He's not gonna survive in our environment where we're a startup, right? And we always have to make do, and we have to find solutions that are, just good enough, not perfect. So these are the kind of insights that you can get by looking at the reports from Bryq. And that's how then you can go in and say, hey, is this problem a rule follower? Is this person a rule follower? If he's not, and I need him to be a rule follower, let me ask him a question. So Jeff, tell me about a project that you were involved in and you had to follow rules that you considered to be nonsensical.
Well,
what did you do?
Look at my resume. You'll see that I work for a few of them. Right. Markellos, any last thoughts here?
We're trying to chip in a little bit into the hiring process. We're solving a huge problem in our eyes, but it's just part of the whole solution. Diversity and inclusion are becoming more and more important every day, and we're very happy to be working in a way to enable our customers to do so much better in those areas. And at the end of the day, being successful is about having the right people.
I'm a huge proponent of assessments if they're used in the right way. I'm glad that you said that you're using them at the top of the funnel because, in my opinion, the resume and the job description, they're just not enough information to be able to make a good match for a candidate to a job, right? They're antiquated, they're text-driven, and they just don't have enough information on them. They're summaries at best, right? You cannot distill an entire person's background into a 1 or 2 page resume. And you certainly cannot distill a job description and what a person does on a daily basis into a 1 or 2 paragraph job description. And then you're trying to match those two imperfect sets of data to do stack ranking and search and match, and it's just not enough. Adding in some kind of cognitive skill assessment or some kind of personality skill assessment will get you just that much closer to the goal line as far as I'm concerned. So love the concept of assessments if they're deployed properly.
Markellos, I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. Markellos, thank you so much for being on the show today. Any last thoughts real quick? Say goodbye.
I want to say goodbye to your audience. It was a pleasure talking to you. And anybody who wants, we have a free trial, 14 days. People can try it out for themselves, understand how easy it is to implement this and how easy it is to improve their hiring. So they should do this.
Through this free trial, they're going to go through the actual personality assessment, right?
Well, they have access to everything as if they have purchased the product. So there's no holdback there.
Awesome. So I'm going to put a link right in the description. If you're interested in going through that personality assessment, feel free, and you'll get a 14-day free trial of Bryq as well. Thank you so much, Markellos. Make it a great one, everybody.
Pleasure talking to you, Jeff. Have a good one.
Cheers.